The rain hammered down so hard that Flynn Kendrick barely heard the pounding on his door over the roar of water on his slate roof. And when he finally did hear it and pulled the door open, 4 drenched orc women nearly fell across his threshold. They were soaked to the bone, their traveling cloaks plastered to their bodies, rain streaming from their dark hair. The tallest one in front, broad-shouldered and athletic, straightened immediately despite her shivering. Her green skin glistened with rainwater, and her small tusks caught the lamplight as she spoke. "Please," she said, her voice strong despite the exhaustion in her amber eyes. "We need shelter, just for the night. We can pay." Flynn blinked at them, taking in the sight of 4 orc sisters, clearly related by the similar shape of their faces and the matching shade of their skin. The second was slighter, quieter, standing just behind the first with her eyes downcast. The third was smiling despite everything, dimples showing even through her weariness. The fourth looked barely old enough to be traveling, her round face anxious. He stepped back and threw the door wide. "Get in here before you drown and put your coin away." The tall one hesitated. "You are human. You would shelter orcs? I am also not an idiot who leaves people in a storm like this." Flynn gestured them inside. "Come on, I have a fire going and soup on." They stumbled in, dripping onto his stone floor. Flynn shut the door against the wind and turned to find all 4 of them staring at him with identical expressions of surprise. He laughed. "What? Did you expect me to slam the door in your faces?" He moved past them toward the kitchen. "There are towels in that chest by the hearth. Get those wet things off before you catch your death." The youngest spoke up, her voice uncertain. "You are not afraid of us." Flynn paused in the doorway to his kitchen and looked back. They were huddled together near his fire, still dripping, still shivering, still shocked that he had let them in. Something in his chest tightened. These were not raiders or bandits. These were exhausted, scared women who had probably walked through that storm for hours. "Should I be?" he asked gently. The quiet one, the second sister, met his eyes for just a moment before looking away. "No," she said softly. "We mean no harm, then we are settled." Flynn turned back toward the kitchen. "I will get bowls, make yourselves at home." Behind him, he heard the rustle of wet cloth and the creak of his chest being opened. Low voices murmured in what he thought might be orcish, too quick and quiet for him to catch. He ladled soup into his largest bowls and balanced 4 of them on a tray, then brought them out. The sisters had shed their cloaks and were wrapped in his towels, sitting in a semicircle around his fire. Their hair hung loose now, drying in the heat. The tall one took the first bowl with both hands. "Thank you," she said, and there was something fierce in her gratitude. "I am Targa Stonebreaker. These are my sisters, Thura, Tessa, and Talitha." She pointed to each in turn. Thura was the quiet one, her dark hair falling across her face as she accepted her bowl. Tessa was the dimpled smiler who grinned at Flynn as she took hers. Talitha, the youngest, ducked her head shyly. "Flynn Kendrick," he said. "I run sheep in the valley." "Alone?" Targa asked, her eyes scanning the single chair, the single set of dishes drying by his sink. "For 5 years now." He settled onto the floor across from them, his own bowl in hand. "It suits me." Tessa laughed, a warm sound that filled his small house. "A man who does not mind his own company. Rare. A man who opens his door to strangers in a storm is rarer," Thura said quietly, not looking up from her soup. Flynn shrugged. "Not so strange, you needed help." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the crackling fire and the rain outside. Flynn watched them relax degree by degree, the tension melting from their shoulders, their breathing slowing. When had they last felt safe enough to rest? "Where are you headed?" he asked. Targa's expression darkened. "Anywhere that will have us. Our holdfast burned 3 weeks ago, burned to the ground." Her hands tightened on her bowl. We barely escaped with our lives. Talitha made a small sound, almost a whimper. Tessa reached over and squeezed her hand. Thura said nothing, but Flynn saw her jaw clench. "I am sorry," Flynn said and meant it. "That is a terrible thing." "We have been walking ever since," Targa continued. "Most towns will not let us pass the gates. Most farms chase us off before we can speak. You are the first person who has shown us kindness." The words landed like stones in Flynn's stomach. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of doors slammed in their faces, of sleeping rough, of fear and exhaustion. And they were still here, still standing, still together. "Well," he said, keeping his voice light, "you are welcome to stay as long as you need. I have space in the loft and I can sleep down here." "We cannot impose," Thura began, but Targa cut her off. "We accept," she said firmly. "And we will work. We are not charity cases." Flynn raised his hands in surrender. "If you insist, I can always use help with the sheep. Lambing season is starting and I will be up half the night checking on them." Tessa brightened. "I know animals. I can help. I can cook," Talitha offered timidly. "I am not very strong, but I can cook and clean." "I am strong," Targa said with a slight smile. "Whatever needs lifting or hauling, I can do it." They all looked at Thura. She glanced up, startled to be the center of attention. "I can mend things," she said. "Fix fences, patch roofs, whatever needs repairing." Flynn found himself smiling. "Then it sounds like we have a deal. Help around the farm for room and board until you figure out where you want to go next." The relief on their faces was palpable. Talitha actually sagged, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. Tessa reached over and hugged her, and then Targa joined in, and then Thura. All 4 sisters wrapped together in front of his fire. Flynn stood and collected the empty bowls, giving them their privacy. He washed the dishes slowly, listening to their soft voices behind him. When he turned back, they were sitting apart again, but the fear had left their eyes. "The loft is up those stairs," he said, pointing. "There are blankets in the chest up there. I will bank the fire and check the sheep, and then I will be on the couch down here if you need anything." "You are going out in this?" Thura asked, looking toward the window where rain still lashed against the glass. "They are my livelihood. I need to make sure they are all accounted for and safe in the barn." He pulled on his heavy oilskin coat. "I will not be long." He pushed out into the storm before any of them could protest. The rain was cold and brutal, and he was drenched within seconds despite the coat. He made his way to the barn by memory more than sight, the wind trying to shove him off his feet. Inside, the sheep were huddled together, dry and safe. He counted them twice to be sure, then checked the latches on the doors and the condition of the roof. No leaks, no problems. They would be fine through the night. When he came back into the house, dripping and shivering, he found Thura still sitting by the fire. She looked up as he entered. "The others went to sleep," she explained. "I wanted to make sure you came back safely." Something warm bloomed in Flynn's chest. "That is kind of you." She stood and took his coat, hanging it near the fire to dry. "You are soaked. Comes with the job." He grabbed a towel and scrubbed at his hair. "You should get some sleep too. Morning comes early on a farm." Thura nodded but did not move toward the stairs. She stood there, firelight playing across her green skin, her dark eyes serious. "Why did you help us?" she asked. Flynn considered the question. "Because you needed help." "That is not a reason most humans would find sufficient." "Then most humans are fools." He met her eyes. "You are people." "You were cold and wet and frightened. What else was I supposed to do?" Thura studied him for a long moment. "You are a good man, Flynn Kendrick. I am just a farmer." "Just?" A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. "I think you are more than that." She turned and climbed the stairs before he could respond, leaving him standing alone by the fire. his heart doing strange things in his chest. He bedded down on the couch, wrapping himself in blankets, and listened to the rain slow from a roar to a patter. Upstairs, he could hear the soft sounds of the sisters settling in. His house had never held so many people before. It felt strange. It felt good. He fell asleep thinking about the way Thura had looked in the firelight and how her quiet voice had sounded when she called him a good man. Morning came with pale sunlight streaming through his windows and the smell of cooking food. Flynn sat up, disoriented for a moment, and then remembered. The sisters. They were still here. He rolled off the couch and padded toward the kitchen in his socks. Talitha stood at his stove, expertly managing 3 pans at once. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled. "Good morning. I hope you do not mind. I found eggs and bacon and bread. Mind, I am impressed." Flynn moved closer, peering at the perfectly cooked food. "That smells incredible." Talitha blushed, her green cheeks darkening. "It is nothing special, just breakfast. It is more than I usually manage." Flynn grabbed plates and started setting the table. "Where are your sisters?" "Targa is outside checking your fences. She said some of them looked weak." "Tessa is in the barn with the sheep, and Thura is on your roof." Flynn nearly dropped the plates. "On my roof?" "She said there were some loose slates. She is fixing them." He rushed to the window and looked out. Sure enough, Thura was perched on his roof, her dark hair tied back, working steadily to secure a section of slates that had been troubling him for weeks. She moved with careful confidence, her hands sure and quick. "She is going to fall," Flynn muttered. "She will not," Talitha said calmly. "Thura never falls. She is the most sure-footed of all of us." Flynn watched for another minute, his heart in his throat, but Talitha was right. Thura moved across the steep roof like she was walking on flat ground. She finished the section she was working on, then climbed down the side of the house with easy grace. She came in through the door a moment later, brushing dust from her hands. "Your roof is sound now. It should hold through the next storm." "You did not have to do that," Flynn said. "We made a deal, work for room and board." Thura moved past him to wash her hands in the basin. "I am earning my keep." Targa came in next, her arms full of cut fence posts. "You have rot in 3 sections of your eastern fence. I am replacing the posts. I will need nails." "In the barn," Flynn said faintly. "The toolbox by the door." Targa nodded and headed back out. Tessa appeared from the direction of the barn, grinning. "You have 2 ewes ready to lamb today. Maybe 3. I moved them to the separate pen and gave them fresh hay and water." She sniffed the air. "Is that bacon?" "Sit down, everyone," Talitha commanded, wielding a spatula like a general's baton. "Food is ready." They gathered around Flynn's small table, which suddenly seemed even smaller with 5 people around it. The sisters filled his house with noise and life, passing plates and talking over each other. Targa argued with Tessa about the best way to deliver a lamb. Talitha fretted about whether the bacon was too crispy. Thura said little, but Flynn noticed she sat next to him, close enough that their elbows brushed when they reached for the bread. After breakfast, Targa stood and stretched. "I am going to finish those fences. Tessa, you should check on those ewes. Talitha, the house could use a proper cleaning." "What about me?" Thura asked. "Whatever Flynn needs." Targa looked at him expectantly. Flynn found himself the subject of 4 pairs of amber eyes. "I was going to check the north pasture, make sure none of the flock wandered off in the storm." "I will come with you," Thura said immediately. They set out together after Flynn grabbed his staff and a length of rope. The morning was cool and fresh after the rain, the sky washed clean and impossibly blue. Puddles dotted the path, and the grass sparkled with droplets. Thura walked beside him in comfortable silence. She was shorter than her sister Targa, more slightly built, but Flynn could see the strength in her arms and shoulders. She moved with a quiet economy of motion, never wasting energy. "Your sisters are formidable," Flynn said after a while. Thura laughed softly. "That is a polite way of saying they are overwhelming. I did not mean it as a criticism. I know," she hopped over a puddle, "but they can be a lot. Targa wants to protect everyone. Tessa wants to charm everyone. Talitha wants to mother everyone. And you," Thura was quiet for a moment. "I just want them to be safe and happy." There was something in her voice that made Flynn look over at her. She was staring ahead, her expression distant. "The fire that destroyed your holdfast," he said carefully. "What happened?" Her jaw tightened. "A human landowner named Gregory Harwick decided he wanted our valley. Our clan had farmed there for 3 generations, but we had no written deed, only tradition and use. Harwick showed up with hired men and torches one night. He told us to leave or burn." Flynn stopped walking. "He burned your homes with you inside. We got out, most of us." Thura's voice went flat. "My father stayed to fight the fire, to save what he could. The roof collapsed on him." "Thura, I am so sorry." She shook her head sharply. "Our mother died 2 years ago. It is just the 4 of us now. We tried to go to the magistrate, but Harwick claimed the land had been abandoned. He said we were squatters and he was within his rights. No one would take our word against a human landowner." Rage kindled in Flynn's chest. "That is not right." "No." Thura started walking again. "But it is legal. Or legal enough that no one will challenge it." They walked in silence for a while, Flynn turning over what she had told him. A man who would burn out a family for their land was a man capable of anything. And the sisters had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. "You can stay here," he heard himself say. "As long as you need." Thura stopped and turned to face him. "You barely know us." "I know enough. I know you and your sisters are hard workers. I know you are honest. I know you deserve better than what happened to you." He met her eyes. "Stay. Help me with the farm. You said yourself you need somewhere to go. This can be it, at least for now." "Flynn." She said his name like she was tasting it. "You do not have to do this. I know, I want to." She studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "All right. We will stay, thank you." They found the sheep in the north pasture, all accounted for and grazing peacefully. Flynn and Thura mended a gap in the stone wall that the storm had widened, working side by side. Thura had a good eye for which stones would fit where, and her hands were quick and clever. They finished in half the time it would have taken Flynn alone. On the way back, Thura asked him about the farm. How long had he owned it? How many sheep? What did he do with the wool? Flynn found himself talking more than he usually did, explaining about the markets in the valley town, about the yearly shearing, about the rhythm of the seasons. "It sounds lonely," Thura said. "Sometimes," Flynn admitted, "but peaceful too. You said you have been alone for 5 years. What happened 5 years ago?" Flynn hesitated. It was not a story he told often, but there was something about Thura's quiet presence that made him want to talk. "I was a soldier," he said. "Served in the border wars for 10 years. When I mustered out, I used my pay to buy this place. I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere no one was trying to kill me. The wars against the orc clans in the north." Thura's voice was carefully neutral. "Yes." Flynn did not look at her. "I am not proud of everything I did. I followed orders, I fought battles, I lost friends. And at the end of it, I realized the whole thing was pointless. We were fighting over land and pride, and people were dying for it, so I left." "Do you regret it, leaving?" "No." This time he did look at her. "Best decision I ever made. I would rather spend my life raising sheep and fixing fences than killing people I do not even know for reasons I do not believe in." Thura nodded slowly. "You are a good man, Flynn Kendrick. I said it last night and I mean it. I am just trying to be better than I was. That is all any of us can do." They walked back to the farmhouse together, and Flynn realized he was smiling. When had he last smiled this much? When had he last enjoyed someone's company this much? Dangerous thoughts. The sisters would leave eventually. They would find somewhere to settle, somewhere they could rebuild their lives. This was temporary. He could not let himself forget that. But when they reached the house and Thura turned to him with that small, quiet smile, his heart did not seem to care about temporary. His heart was doing foolish things, and he was powerless to stop it. The next few days fell into a rhythm. The sisters rose with the sun and set to work without being asked. Targa repaired everything that needed strength. Fences, gates, the barn door that had been sagging for months. Tessa spent her time with the animals, and Flynn had to admit she had a gift. The sheep were calmer around her, and 2 ewes lambed successfully under her watchful care. Talitha transformed the farmhouse, cleaning and organizing until it shone. She cooked meals that made Flynn wonder how he had survived on his own bland efforts for so long, and Thura worked beside Flynn, quiet and steady. She helped him move the flock to new pasture. She repaired the well cover. She rethatched a section of the barn roof. She was always nearby, always ready to help, never asking for anything in return. On the 4th morning, Flynn came down to find all 4 sisters sitting at his table, whispering urgently to each other. They fell silent when they saw him. "Good morning," he said cautiously. "Good morning." Tessa said brightly, too brightly, "We were just talking about you." "Should I be concerned?" Targa laughed, a deep, rolling sound. "No, we were simply discussing what an excellent host you have been." "And how handsome you are," Tessa added. Flynn blinked. "What?" "Very handsome," Talitha agreed, blushing. "And kind. You are very kind." "And a good farmer," Targa said. "Strong, hard-working, excellent husband material." Flynn felt his face heating. "I think you are making fun of me." "Not at all." Tessa grinned at him. "We are quite serious. In fact, we were just debating which of us saw you first when you opened the door." "That was me," Targa said. "I was in front." "But I saw him when he stepped back to let us in," Tessa countered. "I had a better view." "This is ridiculous," Talitha said. "It does not matter who saw him first. What matters is who he would prefer." They all looked at Flynn expectantly. He stared back, completely at a loss. "This is a joke," he said finally. "You are teasing me." "We are completely serious," Targa said. "You are unmarried, we are unmarried, you need help on your farm, we need a home." "It is logical, logical." Flynn sat down hard in his chair. "You want to marry me for logic, not just logic," Tessa said. "You are also, as we mentioned, quite handsome." Flynn looked from one face to another. They were all smiling at him, but he could not tell if they were serious or simply having fun at his expense. Surely they could not mean it. Why would any of them want to marry him? He was just a farmer, a former soldier with no family and no prospects beyond his small flock of sheep. "I think you are all mad," he said. "Probably," Targa agreed cheerfully. "But that does not change the facts. You need a wife, we need a home, one of us should marry you." "I vote for me," Tessa said. "I saw him second, so I have second claim, but I am clearly the most charming." "You are the most talkative," Targa said. "I am the strongest. That is more useful on a farm." "I am the best cook," Talitha offered. "Surely that counts for something." They continued to argue, their voices rising in good-natured competition. Flynn sat frozen, his mind reeling. They could not be serious. This had to be some kind of orc humor he did not understand. He glanced over at Thura. She was sitting slightly apart from her sisters, her expression unreadable. She had not said a word. When she noticed him looking, she stood abruptly and headed for the door. "I am going to check the sheep," she said quietly, and slipped outside before anyone could respond. Flynn watched her go, something twisting in his chest. The other 3 sisters continued their debate, but he was not listening anymore. He stood and followed Thura outside. He found her in the barn, sitting on a bale of hay with her face in her hands. She looked up when he entered, and he saw the sheen of tears on her cheeks before she quickly wiped them away. "I am sorry," she said. "They did not mean to make you uncomfortable. It is just their way of coping. They make jokes when things are hard." Flynn sat down beside her. "Is that what it was? A joke?" Thura was quiet for a long moment. "For them, perhaps. A way to pretend we have a future even for a few minutes. We have lost everything, Flynn. Our home, our father, our place in the world. Sometimes you have to laugh or you will only cry." "And for you?" Flynn asked. "Was it a joke for you?" She turned to look at him, and there was something raw in her eyes. "I did not participate, did you notice? I could not. Because for me it is not a joke." Flynn's breath caught. "Thura, you have been so kind to us, so generous. And I know we will have to leave eventually. I know this cannot last. But I find myself wishing it could." She looked down at her hands. "I find myself wishing you could see me the way you deserve to be seen, as more than a refugee you took pity on." "I do not pity you," Flynn said. The words came out rough. "Thura, I do not pity you at all." "Then what?" She met his eyes again. "What do you feel when you look at me?" He should lie. He should say something safe and distant. He should protect himself from the inevitable hurt when she left. But he had spent 10 years as a soldier doing what he should do, and 5 years as a farmer being alone because it was safe. He was tired of safe. "I feel like I have been waiting for you," he said. "Like my whole life has been a path leading to that moment when I opened my door and saw you standing there in the rain." Thura's eyes widened. "Flynn, I know it is foolish. I know it has only been a few days, but I cannot help it. When I am with you, everything feels right. When I am not with you, I am counting the minutes until I will be again." He laughed, but it sounded shaky. "Your sisters were joking about marriage, but I was not laughing. I was thinking about how much I wanted it to be true. With me," Thura whispered, "or with any of us. With you." Flynn reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm and slightly rough from work, and her fingers curled around his like they belonged there. "Only you, Thura. From the first moment I saw you." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she was smiling. "I thought I was alone in this. I thought you saw me as just another stray you took in. Never." He lifted his other hand and gently wiped away her tear. "You are not a stray. You are the woman I am falling in love with." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. And then she was leaning forward and he was leaning forward, and their lips met in a kiss that tasted of salt and hope and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like fools. "Your sisters are going to have opinions about this," Flynn said. Thura laughed. "My sisters are going to be insufferable. I can handle insufferable. Good. Because I am not sure I can handle losing you." He pulled her close and held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. Outside, the world continued turning. Inside the barn, everything had changed. They sat together for a long time, talking in quiet voices about everything and nothing. Thura told him about her childhood in the holdfast, about growing up with 3 sisters who were louder and bolder than she was. Flynn told her about his years in the army, about the friends he had lost, and the mistakes he still regretted. "I was never anyone special," Flynn admitted. "In the army, I was just another soldier. Here, I am just another farmer. I always felt like I was waiting for my life to actually start, you know, like I was holding my breath for something to happen." "You are special to me," Thura said. "And this is your life, Flynn. It already started. You have built something here, something real and good. It feels more real and good with you in it." She kissed him again, soft and sweet, and Flynn thought that if this was a dream, he never wanted to wake up. When they finally returned to the house, hand in hand, The other three sisters were sitting at the table. They all looked up as Flynn and Thura entered, and Flynn saw identical expressions of knowing amusement cross their faces. "So," Targa said, leaning back in her chair, "did you two have a good talk in the barn?" Thura's cheeks flushed green, but she did not let go of Flynn's hand. "We did." "And," Tessa prompted, grinning, "and I think the competition is over," Thura said quietly, "if you were serious about it to begin with." Talitha clapped her hands together. "I knew it. I knew you two would figure it out." "We were not really competing," Targa admitted. "Well, perhaps a little, but mostly we were trying to make him laugh, and also to make you jealous enough to actually say something." Thura stared at her sisters. "You planned this." "Not the whole thing," Tessa said, "but we could see the way you looked at him, and the way he looked at you when you were not paying attention. It seemed like you both needed a push." Flynn could not help but laugh. "You are all ridiculous." "But effective," Targa pointed out. "You are holding hands now." "We are," Thura agreed. She looked at Flynn, her expression turning serious. "If you truly want this, want me, I need you to know what it means. Humans and orcs together, it is not accepted. People will say things. They will make your life difficult." "Let them," Flynn said. "I have faced worse than gossip. It is more than gossip. It could affect your business. People might refuse to buy from you. Then I will find new people to buy from me." He squeezed her hand. "Thura, I am not afraid of what other people think. I am only afraid of losing you." She smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Then you have me, for as long as you want me." "Forever then," Flynn said. "I want you forever." Tessa made a happy squealing sound. Talitha was crying openly now, happy tears streaming down her face. Even Targa looked pleased, though she tried to hide it behind a gruff expression. "Well," Targa said, "I suppose we should talk about the future then. If you and Thura are going to be together, what does that mean for the rest of us? We cannot stay here forever as your farmhands." "Why not?" Flynn asked. They all stared at him. "I am serious," he continued. "This farm is bigger than I can manage alone. With 5 of us working it, we could expand, run more sheep, maybe plant crops. We could build a real life here, all of us together." "You would do that?" Talitha asked. "Let us all stay. You are Thura's sisters. That makes you family. Of course you can stay." Targa stood and crossed the room. She clapped a hand on Flynn's shoulder, her grip strong enough to make him wince. "You are a good man, Flynn Kendrick. Welcome to our family." They spent the rest of the day planning. Targa wanted to expand the sheep pens and build a proper workshop. Tessa suggested adding chickens and maybe a dairy cow. Talitha timidly proposed a vegetable garden. Flynn listened to their ideas and added his own, and Thura sat beside him, her hand in his, her smile never fading. For the first time in 5 years, Flynn's house felt like a home. That night, after the sisters had gone up to the loft and the house was quiet, Flynn lay on his couch and stared at the ceiling. He could hear soft voices above him, the sisters talking in the dark. He could not make out the words, but he heard Thura's voice among them, warm and happy. He had spent so long alone, so long thinking that was what he deserved, what he wanted. But now he understood. He had not wanted to be alone. He had been waiting for a stormy night and a knock on his door and 4 orc sisters who would change his life forever. He fell asleep smiling and dreamed of green eyes and a quiet voice, and a future he had never dared to imagine. The next week passed in a blur of work and laughter. They expanded the sheep pens. They planted Talitha's garden. Tessa convinced Flynn to buy 3 hens and a rooster from a farmer in the valley, and they built a coop together. Targa constructed a workshop where she could do metalwork and carpentry, and Flynn spent every moment he could with Thura. They worked side by side during the day, repairing and building and tending. At night, they sat together by the fire, talking until the others went to bed. Flynn learned about her love of stargazing, her gift for solving puzzles, her quiet strength that had held her family together through tragedy. She learned about his dreams for the farm, his memories of his parents who had died when he was young, his fear that he would never be enough for anyone. "You are more than enough," she told him one night, her head resting on his shoulder. "You are everything." He kissed the top of her head. "So are you." Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be, and then Gregory Harwick showed up. Flynn was in the barn when he heard the sound of horses. He stepped outside to see 3 riders approaching the farmhouse. The man in the lead was tall and well-dressed. His dark hair shot through with silver. He sat his horse like a man used to being obeyed. Flynn's instincts, honed by years of soldiering, immediately went on alert. This was trouble. Targa emerged from the workshop, a hammer in her hand. Tessa came around from the back of the house. Talitha appeared in the doorway, and Thura stepped out of the barn behind Flynn, her face going pale as she saw the riders. "Harwick," she breathed. The man smiled as he dismounted. It was not a pleasant smile. "Well, well, the Stonebreaker girls. I have been looking for you." "You have no business here," Targa said, her voice hard. "This is not your land." "Not yet," Harwick agreed. He turned his gaze to Flynn. "You must be the farmer. Kendrick, is it? I am Gregory Harwick. Perhaps you have heard of me." "I have heard enough," Flynn said coldly. Harwick's smile widened. "Then you know I am a man who gets what he wants, and what I want is this valley, all of it. I already own the northern section. I intend to own the south as well. This farm is not for sale." "Everything is for sale, Kendrick. It is just a matter of price." Harwick pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I am prepared to offer you a very generous sum, enough to buy a much larger property somewhere else, somewhere safer." "Safer?" Flynn crossed his arms. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all. Simply pointing out facts. This is rough country. Accidents happen. Fires, storms, bandits. A man alone could find himself in trouble very quickly." Rage flashed hot in Flynn's chest, but he kept his voice level. "I am not alone, and I am not selling." "Are you certain? Because I notice you are harboring the Stonebreakers." "That is very generous of you, but you should know they are liars. They have been spreading vicious rumors about me, claiming I burned their holdfast. Slander, of course. I would never do such a thing." "You are a liar," Tessa spat. "We saw your men, we saw the torches." "You saw nothing that could be proven in any court." Harwick's voice turned mocking. 4 orc girls against a respected human landowner. Who do you think people will believe?" Flynn stepped forward. "Get off my land." "I am trying to do you a favor, Kendrick. Take my offer." "Leave before you get hurt." "No." Harwick's expression hardened. "You are making a mistake." "The only mistake was made by the man who thinks he can threaten me on my own property." Flynn's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "I said get off my land. If you are still here in 1 minute, I will throw you off." For a moment the 2 men stared at each other. Then Harwick laughed, though the sound was ugly. "You have spirit. I will give you that. But spirit will not save you, Kendrick. This valley will be mine. You can leave peacefully, or you can leave in pieces. Your choice." He remounted his horse. His 2 companions, who had remained silent throughout, did the same. Harwick looked down at Flynn from his saddle. "1 week," he said. "I will give you 1 week to reconsider. After that, well. Accidents happen." He wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. Flynn watched until they were out of sight, his hands clenched into fists. "He is going to burn you out," Targa said flatly, "just like he did to us. Let him try." Flynn turned to face the sisters. "I am not running. This is my home, our home now, and I will defend it." "You do not understand what you are up against," Thura said, her voice shaking. "Harwick is rich and powerful. He has connections. He can do whatever he wants and no one will stop him." "Then we make someone stop him." Flynn's mind was already racing, putting together a plan. "You said he burned your holdfast. Do you have any proof?" "We saw his men," Targa said. "We recognized some of them, but Harwick claimed they were acting on their own and we had no way to prove otherwise." "What about witnesses? Was anyone else there?" The sisters exchanged glances. "Our neighbors," Talitha said slowly. "The Iron Hand clan lived on the next ridge. They saw the smoke. Some of them came to help. Would they testify to what they saw? Maybe, but it is still our word against his." Flynn shook his head. "Not if we can establish a pattern. He threatened me today, and you all heard it. If he follows through, if he tries to burn me out or harm me in any way, that proves his willingness to use violence to get land. Combined with your testimony, it might be enough to bring charges." "You want to use yourself as bait," Thura said, her face stricken. "Flynn, no. That is too dangerous. It is the only way. If we can catch him in the act, prove he is willing to commit arson and violence, then your testimony about what happened to your holdfast becomes credible." "And if he kills you in the process?" Thura demanded. "What then?" Flynn took her hands. "He will not. I was a soldier, remember. I know how to defend myself, and I will not be alone. We will be ready for him." Targa nodded slowly. "It could work, if we prepare properly, set watches. Make sure we see them coming." "No," Thura said again. "There has to be another way." "There is not," Flynn said gently. "Thura, if we run, he wins, and he will just do this to someone else. How many more families will he destroy? We have to stop him." Tears streamed down her face. "I cannot lose you, not now, not when I just found you. You will not lose me." He pulled her close, holding her tight. "I promise. We will be careful, we will be smart. And when this is over, Harwick will be in chains and we will be safe, all of us." She clung to him, her face buried in his chest. Over her head, Flynn met Targa's eyes. The orc woman nodded, grim determination on her face. "Tell us what you need," Targa said. "We will do whatever it takes." They spent the next 2 days preparing. Flynn rode into the valley town and spoke with the magistrate, a weary man named Aldrich Brennan. Flynn explained the situation, and Brennan listened with a deepening frown. "I know Harwick," Brennan said. "He is a snake, but he is a rich, well-connected snake. If you accuse him without proof, he will destroy you in court. What if I have proof? Then bring it to me and I will issue a warrant." Brennan leaned forward. "But be careful, Kendrick. Harwick does not play fair. If he thinks you are a threat, he will eliminate you." "I am counting on him trying." Flynn also sought out the Iron Hand clan. They lived 3 hours to the north, a small community of orc families who farmed and raised goats. When Flynn explained why he was there, they welcomed him warily. The clan leader, an older orc named Grek Ironhand, listened to Flynn's story and then nodded slowly. "We saw the fires," Grek said. "We went to help, but by the time we arrived, it was too late. The Stonebreaker holdfast was gone. Will you testify to that, if I can prove Harwick is behind it?" Grek studied Flynn for a long moment. "You are human. Why do you care what happens to orcs?" "Because the woman I love is an orc," Flynn said simply. "And because what happened to the Stonebreakers was wrong. I will not stand by and let it happen again." Grek's expression softened. "You are a brave man, or a foolish one, perhaps both." He extended his hand. "Yes, if you bring proof, the Iron Hands will testify." Flynn shook his hand, relief flooding through him. "Thank you." On the 3rd day, Flynn and the sisters fortified the farm. They filled barrels with water in case of fire. They set up watch posts where they could see anyone approaching from a distance. Targa sharpened every tool that could be used as a weapon. Tessa moved the sheep to the far pasture, out of harm's way, and Thura barely left Flynn's side. She helped him prepare, but her eyes were haunted. "I am afraid," she admitted that night as they sat together by the fire. "I lost my father to Harwick's greed. I cannot lose you too." "You will not," Flynn promised. Thura, I have survived 10 years of war. I can survive this. War is different. In war, you have an army behind you. Here, it is just us. That is all I need. He kissed her forehead. I trust you and your sisters. Together, we are strong enough to face anything. She leaned into him, and they sat in silence, listening to the crackle of the fire. Upstairs, her sisters were sleeping. Outside, the night was still and dark. Flynn let himself imagine for a moment that this was all there was. No threats, no danger, just him and Thura and her sisters building a life together in this valley. He wanted that future so badly it ached. But first, they had to survive the next few days. On the fourth night after Harwick's visit, they came. Flynn was on watch, sitting on the roof where he had a clear view of the approaches to the farm. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light over the valley. He saw them coming from half a mile away, dark shapes moving through the fields, at least 6 of them. He slid down from the roof and woke the sisters. They are here. Everyone moved into position. They had rehearsed this. Targa and Tessa would guard the barn and the animals. Talitha would stay in the house with buckets of water, ready to fight any fires. Thura and Flynn would meet the intruders and try to stop them before they could do any damage. Remember, Flynn said, we want to catch them in the act. We need witnesses and proof. What we need is for them to leave, Thura muttered, but she gripped the iron poker she was carrying like a weapon. The 6 men approached openly, making no attempt at stealth now that they were close. One of them carried a torch. Another had a can that sloshed with liquid, lamp oil probably. Flynn stepped out of the shadows and they stopped. That is far enough, Flynn called. You are trespassing. One of the men laughed. Harwick owns this land now. You are the trespasser. Harwick can come tell me that himself if he is man enough. But I am guessing he sent you to do his dirty work while he stays safe at home. Smart man, Harwick, knows how to delegate. The man with the torch grinned. You should have taken his offer, Kendrick. Now things are going to get ugly. They already are ugly, Thura said, stepping up beside Flynn. 6 men with torches in the middle of the night. This is arson. You are all witnesses to a crime. The only crime here is harboring these orc squatters, another man said. Harwick is cleaning up the valley, doing what the law should have done years ago. The law does not burn people out of their homes, Flynn said. But since you are so eager to commit crimes in Harwick's name, I should tell you that I have already spoken to Magistrate Brennan. He knows you are coming. If this farm burns, you will all hang. The men exchanged uncertain glances. The one with the torch hesitated. He is bluffing, the leader said. Harwick promised us coin. We do the job, we get paid, and no one will care what happened to one farmer and a few orcs. I will care, said a new voice. Everyone turned. Magistrate Brennan stepped out of the barn, followed by 2 deputies. Behind them came Greg Ironhand and 5 members of his clan. The leader of Harwick's men went pale. What is this? This is the end of Gregory Harwick's reign of terror, Brennan said coldly. You are all under arrest for attempted arson and conspiracy to commit murder. We have not done anything yet. You came here with torches and lamp oil. You admitted your intent. That is enough. Brennan nodded to his deputies. Take them. The men tried to run, but they were surrounded. Within minutes, all 6 were in chains. Brennan turned to Flynn. Well done, Kendrick. This should be enough to bring charges against Harwick himself. Will it stick? Flynn asked. With their testimony, the testimony of the Stonebreakers and the testimony of the Iron Hands. Yes. I believe it will, Brennan smiled grimly. Harwick made a lot of enemies over the years. People will be eager to see him face justice. Flynn sagged with relief. Thura caught him, her arms around him, and he held her tight. It is over, he whispered into her hair. We did it. You did it, she corrected. You brilliant, reckless, wonderful man. Targa emerged from the barn, grinning. "I knew I liked you, Kendrick." Tessa and Talitha rushed over, both of them talking at once, laughing and crying and hugging everyone they could reach. Grek Ironhand approached Flynn and clasped his hand. "You have courage," the orc said. "The Ironhands will not forget this. If you ever need anything, you have only to ask." "Thank you," Flynn said, "for coming, for standing with us. It was the right thing to do." Grek looked at the sisters. "Your father would be proud. All of you." Targa's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears back and nodded. Brennan and his deputies led the prisoners away. Grek and his clan stayed for a while, talking with the sisters in Orcish, clasping hands and making promises. By the time everyone left and the farm was quiet again, dawn was breaking over the eastern hills. Flynn stood in his doorway, watching the sun rise, and felt Thura slip her hand into his. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait for the trial." Brennan said it will take a few weeks to organize, but Harwick will face charges. Those men will testify against him to save themselves. Flynn looked down at her. "And then we get to live our lives. Here, if you want." Thura smiled, and it was like the sunrise, bright and full of promise. "I want." The trial of Gregory Harwick became the talk of the valley. Magistrate Brennan presided over it himself, and the courtroom was packed every day. Harwick's hired men testified against him, describing how he had paid them to burn out families who would not sell their land. The Stonebreaker sisters testified about the fire that destroyed their holdfast and killed their father. The Ironhands testified about what they had seen. And Flynn testified about Harwick's threats and his attempt to burn out the farm. Harwick's lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning a verdict of guilty on all charges. Harwick was sentenced to 20 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all the families he had harmed. His lands were seized and sold, the proceeds distributed to his victims. The Stonebreaker sisters received enough money to rebuild their holdfast if they wished. Instead, they used it to buy shares in Flynn's farm, officially becoming co-owners. Targa drew up plans for expansion. Tessa negotiated contracts with merchants in 3 towns. Talitha planted a garden that became the envy of the valley. And Thura stayed by Flynn's side through it all, his partner in every sense of the word. A month after the trial ended, on a bright morning in late spring, Flynn and Thura were married. The ceremony took place on the farm, in the meadow above the house where wildflowers grew in profusion. Magistrate Brennan officiated. Targa, Tessa, and Talitha stood with Thura. Grek Ironhand and several members of his clan attended, along with neighbors from the valley who had come to respect Flynn and the sisters. It was a small wedding, simple and honest, and it was perfect. Thura wore a dress that Talitha had sewn, pale green linen embroidered with white flowers. Her dark hair was crowned with a wreath of real wildflowers. She looked so beautiful that Flynn could barely speak when he saw her. They exchanged vows under the open sky, promising to love and support each other through whatever came. When Flynn slipped the ring onto Thura's finger, a simple band of silver that Targa had forged, his hand shook. "I love you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Thura replied, her eyes shining. "My unexpected gift, my home." They kissed and everyone cheered. Targa whooped. Tessa laughed through happy tears. Talitha sobbed openly. Grek Ironhand raised his cup in a salute. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food and drink and music. Tessa played a fiddle that someone had brought, and Targa danced with surprising grace. Talitha made sure everyone was fed, and Flynn and Thura moved through it all hand in hand, smiling until their faces hurt. When the guests finally left, and the sisters retreated to the house they had built for themselves at the edge of the property, Flynn and Thura were alone. They walked together to the farmhouse, their farmhouse now, legally and truly. Inside, firelight flickered warm and welcoming. Flynn turned to Thura and pulled her close. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," she said. "You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me hope when I had lost it. You gave me love when I did not think anyone could see me that way." "I see you," Flynn said. "I see all of you, and I love all of you." She kissed him, slow and deep, and he lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bedroom, her laughter ringing in his ears. The years that followed were good ones. The farm prospered. Flynn and Thura worked side by side, expanding the flock and planting new fields. Targa built a reputation as a skilled craftswoman, and people came from all over the valley to buy her work. Tessa established trade routes that brought goods from distant markets. Talitha opened a small bakery in the valley town, and her bread and pastries became famous. 2 years after the wedding, Thura gave birth to a daughter. They named her Vera, and she had her mother's green skin and her father's blue eyes. She was loud and curious and fearless, and Flynn loved her with a ferocity that surprised him. 3 years later came a son whom they named Jory. He was quieter than his sister, thoughtful and gentle. He followed Thura everywhere, learning to mend fences and repair tools almost before he could walk. Targa eventually married a human blacksmith from the valley town, a widower with a kind smile and strong hands. Tessa married one of Grek Iron Hand's sons, and the union strengthened the bonds between the two families. Talitha chose to remain unmarried, content with her bakery and her nieces and nephews. The farm became a gathering place for both humans and orcs, proof that people of different races could live and work together in peace. Children played in the meadows without knowing or caring about the color of each other's skin. Families shared meals and stories and laughter. And through it all, Flynn and Thura remained the heart of it. They grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced challenges and celebrated triumphs. They raised their children and welcomed grandchildren. On a warm evening in late summer, 20 years after that stormy night when 4 orc sisters knocked on his door, Flynn sat on the porch of his farmhouse and watched the sun set over the valley. Thura sat beside him, her hand in his, her head resting on his shoulder. Vera was in the barn with her children, teaching them to care for the sheep. Jory was in the workshop with Targa's husband, learning metalwork. Targa and Tessa and Talitha were in the kitchen, preparing dinner for the whole extended family. "You remember the night we met?" Thura asked. Flynn smiled. "Every detail. You were soaking wet and shivering, and you looked at me like you could not believe I had let you in." "I could not. You were the first person in weeks who had shown us any kindness. I thought you were mad. Maybe I was. Maybe I still am." He turned to look at her, this woman who had changed his entire world. "But if loving you is madness, I never want to be sane," she laughed, the sound as warm and familiar as home. "You are a sentimental fool, Flynn Kendrick. And you are the love of my life, Thura Kendrick." They sat together as the light faded from gold to amber to deep purple. Behind them, through the open windows, they could hear the voices of their family. Laughter and conversation and the clatter of dishes, the sounds of home. Flynn thought back to the lonely man he had been, living in this house with only silence for company. He had thought he was content. He had thought he wanted nothing more than peace and solitude, but he had been wrong. He had been waiting, even if he had not known it. Waiting for a stormy night and a knock on his door. Waiting for 4 sisters who needed shelter and hope. waiting for a quiet orc woman with dark eyes and a gentle smile who would teach him what love truly meant. "Thank you," he said. Thura lifted her head to look at him. "For what?" "For knocking on my door, for staying, for choosing me." She cupped his face in her hands, her touch as tender now as it had been on their wedding day. "You chose me too. You saw me when I felt invisible. You loved me when I did not think I deserved love. You gave me a life I never dared to dream of. Then we are even." "No," she kissed him softly. "I will always be grateful. Every single day I wake up amazed that this is my life, that you are my husband, that we built all of this together. Our life," Flynn corrected. "Our home, our family." From inside, Targa called that dinner was ready. The children came running from various corners of the farm, hungry and laughing. Thura stood and pulled Flynn to his feet. They went inside together, into the warmth and noise and love. The table was crowded with people, human and orc, sitting side by side, sharing food and stories. This was their legacy, Flynn thought. Not just the farm or the money or the buildings. This. People choosing love over fear, choosing connection over division. He sat at the head of the table with Thura beside him, and he looked around at the faces of his family. His daughters and sons, his sisters by marriage, their spouses and children. All of them here because one night he had opened his door to strangers and found his future waiting on the other side. Targa raised her glass. "A toast," she declared, "to family, to home, and to the foolish farmer who took in 4 desperate orcs and changed all our lives." "I was not foolish," Flynn protested. "I was practical. I needed farmhands." Everyone laughed. Tessa grinned at him. "You needed someone to fix your roof and mend your fences. And cook real food," Talitha added. "And teach you how to actually care for animals instead of just feeding them," Tessa said. All right, all right." Flynn raised his own glass. "You are right. I needed you, all of you. I just did not know it until you knocked on my door. The best things in life are the ones we do not know we need," Thura said softly, "until they arrive and we cannot imagine living without them." They drank together, and then the meal began in earnest. Plates were passed and refilled. Children chattered and adults talked over them. Someone told a joke and everyone groaned. Someone else started a story and everyone leaned in to listen. And Flynn sat in the middle of it all, his heart full to bursting. He had been a soldier and a loner and a farmer who thought he wanted nothing more than peace and quiet. But he had been wrong about what he wanted. This was what he wanted. This chaos and noise and love. This family that had been built from nothing, from a stormy night and an act of simple kindness. This life that he shared with the woman he loved, surrounded by people who mattered. Later that night, after everyone had gone to their own homes and the house was quiet again, Flynn and Thura lay in bed together. She curled against his side, her head on his chest, her breathing slow and steady. "Flynn," she murmured, half asleep, "I am glad I knocked on your door." He smiled into the darkness. "So am I." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. The sheep settled for the night in their pen. Somewhere an owl called and another answered. The farm slept, secure and peaceful under the stars. And inside the farmhouse, Flynn Kendrick held his wife close and thought about second chances and unexpected gifts, and how a single moment of compassion could change everything. He had opened his door to 4 strangers on a rainy night. He had offered them shelter without knowing who they were or what they would become to him, and in return they had given him everything he had never known he needed: love, family, home, purpose. He fell asleep with Thura in his arms, grateful for every single day that had led him to this moment, and looking forward to all the days still to come, because this was not the end of their story. It was simply another chapter in a life being written day by day, filled with ordinary moments and extraordinary love. A life that had started with 4 orc girls begging a lonely farmer for shelter and had grown into something beautiful and lasting and real. A life worth living. A love worth fighting for. A home worth protecting, and it was all his, all theirs, forever.